threw her a flotation cushion that we used to sit on the dinghy, right after she went in. But I couldn't tell if she got it or not.
He threatened to throw her overboard. Her daughter said it publicly, on camera, to Fox News. He threatened to throw her overboard. On the night of April 4th, 2026, Lynette Hooker went overboard. Brian Hooker rowed away. Not toward her, not toward the yacht anchored 1,000 yards away where she was allegedly swimming, not toward the place she went into the water. Away. 4 miles in the wrong direction,
at her,
and nobody is
and then he
explaining
started
that.
swimming or
Not Brian,
paddling
not
to
his
shore.
attorney, not the Royal
So,
Bahamas Police Force,
I don't
not the U.S. Coast
know why
Guard
he
that
didn't
opened a
drop
criminal
anchor and
investigation
look
4
for her.
days after she disappeared.
That's the first thing I
But
would have
here is what
done
they
is
do
go
have,
towards her,
a
not
map.
away from her.
Brian drew it himself.
This is part of our
He sent it
interview
to
that
his
we
friends,
did
to other
with
boaters,
Hooker's
to law
stepdaughter,
enforcement.
Carly
A
Aylesworth.
screenshot from the
She's 28
Navionics
years old.
GPS
She
app
lives in Michigan.
with his own
and
handwriting
she has
showing
been
exactly where his dinghy went that night. And that map shows 4 miles between where Lynette went into the water and where Brian ended up at 4 a.m., 4 miles, in the opposite direction from his missing wife. Stay with us, because this video is going to show you the texts Brian sent that told 2 different stories. The arrest from 11 years ago that nobody mentioned, and why the one detail investigators keep coming back to, the engine safety lanyard on the wrong person, may be the answer to everything. Every claim in this video is attributed to a named source. This is not speculation. And by the end, you will understand exactly why Brian Hooker has been sitting in a Bahamian police station for 5 days, and why tonight, right now, authorities must decide whether to charge him with causing her death. Her name is Lynette Hooker. She was 55 years old. Born in Onstead, Michigan, a small lakeside town where the water is part of how you grow up. She had been around lakes, boats, sailing, and swimming her entire life. That is not our assessment. That is what her mother, Darlene Hamlet, confirmed publicly to CNN. She was a mother, a daughter, a sailor. She had a daughter named Carly Aylesworth, 28 years old, from a relationship before Brian. She and Brian had been together for 25 years. Carly has known him her entire life, and Lynette documented everything: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The account was called The Sailing Hookers, Louisiana, Florida, the Bahamas, sea turtles on the ocean floor, manatees, sunsets that bled into the water, cinnamon rolls baked in a solar oven on deck. She was luminous in those videos. Wind in her hair, sun on her shoulders. I'm moving like someone who had found exactly where she was supposed to be. Her last TikTok posted April 2nd, 2026, 2 days before she disappeared. Her last Instagram photo posted April 4th, the day she went missing. The caption said, "Not going anywhere for a while." She had no idea how final those words would be. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome to the Silenced Case. Every claim in this video is attributed to a named source. Every piece of evidence is publicly confirmed. We do not speculate. We do not name suspects. We follow the evidence, and we show you exactly where it leads. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because what we are about to assemble in this video has not been put together this way anywhere else. We're going to walk you through the texts Brian sent that told 2 different stories, and the arrest from 11 years ago that most coverage buried. The map Brian drew himself that raises a question nobody has answered, and the engine safety lanyard on the wrong person, the detail that forensic analysts and domestic violence experts keep returning to. This is day 9. The evidence is already pointing somewhere. Let us show you exactly where. April 4th, 2026, Hopetown, Abaco Islands, Bahamas. Brian and Lynette have been in the Bahamas since at least February. 9 weeks on the water. Every day documented. Paddleboarding, scuba diving, island hopping. By every visible measure, exactly the retirement life they had planned. At 7:30 p.m., they leave Hopetown's Abaco Inn in their 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy. Small open boat, no roof, the kind sailors use for short crossings between an anchored yacht and shore. Eyed their destination, the Soulmate, anchored near Elbow Cay. The conditions were not good. Winds of 18 to 22 knots, choppy water, night falling, darkness coming fast. They were not wearing life jackets. According to Brian's account to police, Lynette went overboard, and according to Brian, she went overboard wearing the engine safety lanyard. Stop there, because that detail changes everything. The engine safety lanyard is the kill switch, a cord that attaches the operator, the person driving the boat, to the ignition. If the operator goes overboard, the engine cuts off automatically. It is designed to protect the driver. Brian was driving, but when Lynette went overboard, the engine cut out, which means the lanyard was on Lynette. How does the passenger end up wearing the driver's safety cord? Brian's account does not explain it. His attorney has not addressed it. The maps do not explain it. That single question, where was the lanyard and how did it get there, is the one forensic analysts, maritime investigators, and domestic violence experts keep returning to, and we will come back to it. Because the answer to that question may be the answer to everything. According to Brian, he last saw Lynette swimming toward shore. He threw a flotation device. He fired signal flares twice. And then the map he drew himself shows him traveling 4 miles in the opposite direction from his wife. He arrived at Marsh Harbor Boat Yards at 4 a.m., 8.5 hours after Lynette went into the water. Before we get to what Brian said when he arrived, the question of the flares. In the audio recording posted by friends Blaine and Marnette Stevenson, Brian says he fired signal flares twice. Signal flares are visible for miles at sea. That is their entire purpose. Alert every vessel, every shore, anyone watching, that someone is in distress. Brian fired 2. Nobody saw them. Not the boats in the area. Not the residents of Hopetown. Not any vessel anchored in surrounding waters. 2 signal flares over open water at night. Nobody saw them. The friends who recorded the call pushed back. They said, someone had to have seen that. Brian did not have an answer. No witnesses to the flares. Add that to the list. He arrived at Marsh Harbor at 4 a.m., 8.5 hours after Lynette disappeared. When the security guard asked where his wife was, Brian said 2 words. She's in the water. And not, call search and rescue. Here are her last known coordinates. She went in at this time. She was swimming in this direction. She's in the water. The guard described Brian as more exhausted than anything else. No visible panic, no urgency. The flat delivery of someone who had been moving through the dark for hours and had arrived somewhere. Search and rescue began at 4 a.m., 8.5 hours after Lynette went into open ocean, at night, in 22 knot winds, without a life jacket, without her phone, without anyone knowing she was missing. The window for surviving an overboard incident in those conditions closes fast. By the time anyone started looking, that window may have already closed. The search ran for 3 days. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, U.S. Coast Guard Aerial Support. They searched the waters between Hopetown and Elbow Cay. They searched the shores of the Abaco Islands. They searched by boat, by air, by foot. They found 1 flotation device in the water, the one Brian said he threw to Lynette when she went overboard. That is the only physical evidence recovered from those waters. No Lynette. On April 7th, the operation was officially converted from rescue to recovery. She had not been found. 1 flotation device recovered from the water. No body, no cause of death. And on April 8th, 1 day after the search became a recovery operation, the Royal Bahamas Police Force arrested Brian Hooker. Royal Bahamas Police Force Assistant Commissioner Eduardo Dames confirmed to Reuters the arrest was based on probable cause. Brian was taken in as a suspect. His attorney, Terrell Butler, confirmed that during more than 3 hours of questioning, Brian was asked about the couple's relationship and personal life, and questioned specifically in relation to causing harm which resulted in her death. Butler said it herself. That language suggests a possible murder charge. Brian has not been charged. He categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. He is still in custody tonight. Now let's talk about the texts. After Lynette disappeared, before his arrest while the search was still running, Brian was communicating, sending messages to friends, to other boaters, to anyone who could help find her. And in those messages, 2 different stories emerged. For the police, Brian said he last saw Lynette swimming toward shore. In a message to a friend, Brian wrote that she swam toward the yacht, toward the soulmate, toward the boat anchored 1,000 yards away, shore or yacht, 2 different directions. In a search operation where every decision about where to look is based on last known direction of movement, 2 different directions is not a minor detail. It is the difference between where search teams are deployed and where Lynette actually was. The inconsistencies go deeper than 2 directions. Think about the sequence of what Brian says happened after Lynette went overboard. He says the engine cut out because she had the lanyard. He says he threw a flotation device to her. He says he fired signal flares twice. He says he tried to paddle toward her, but the winds and currents drove him away. He says he last saw her swimming. And that is 5 separate claims, each one verifiable, each one either consistent or inconsistent with what the physical evidence, witness accounts, and the GPS map actually show. The flotation device, found by search and rescue, consistent with his account on that point. The signal flares, not seen by anyone, not consistent with the claim on that point. The last known direction of Lynette's swimming, 2 different versions, shore and yacht, not consistent with each other. The route of the dinghy, 4 miles from where Lynette went in, consistent with drift under high winds or consistent with paddling away. The map cannot tell you which. Investigators are working through each of these points right now, and there is more. Friends Blaine and Marnette Stevenson recorded a phone call with Brian on April 7th, 3 days after Lynette disappeared. They posted it to YouTube. In that recording, purportedly Brian's voice not independently verified for editing, the account shifts again. He says Lynette basically just bounced off the dinghy, not fell, not lost her balance, not was knocked overboard by a wave, bounced off. 3 versions of the same moment, each slightly different, each told to a different audience, one to the police, one in text messages, one on a phone call that ended up on YouTube, and a map that does not align with any of them. Here is the map. And this is where Brian's own evidence becomes the most important document in this investigation. CBS News obtained the Navionics screenshots Brian sent to friends and law enforcement. And he drew his own route on the screenshots, his version of where the dinghy went on the night of April 4th. The route begins at the south end of Aunt Pat's Bay near Tahiti Beach, where Brian says Lynette went overboard, and it shows his dinghy traveling 4 miles west to Marsh Harbor, 4 miles in the opposite direction from his wife. Brian's explanation: winds and currents drove him. Without engine power in 18 to 22 knot conditions, a small dinghy drifts fast. He was at the mercy of the sea. That is physically plausible. But here is what that explanation does not address. There was an anchor on the dinghy. Carly Aylesworth asked this publicly, on camera, to CNN. She said, "Why wouldn't he drop anchor and look for her? Why did he paddle the other way?" An anchor stops drift. It holds a vessel in place. It buys time for the person in the water to be located. It is the single most important tool available to someone in a powerless dinghy trying to stay near a person who just went overboard. Experienced sailors keep an anchor on their dinghy. Brian and Lynette had been sailing for a decade. They documented their life on the water for years. No anchor was deployed. The dinghy traveled 4 miles away from Lynette. Carly's question has not been answered. Why did he paddle the other way and arrived at 4 a.m.? Now let's talk about the arrest they buried. Because April 8, 2026 is not the first time Brian Hooker's name appeared in a police report connected to Lynette. In 2015, 11 years earlier, and there was a domestic incident in Kentwood, Michigan. Both Brian and Lynette were involved. Both made accusations. According to the Kentwood police report obtained by ABC News, Brian told police Lynette struck him in the face 4 to 5 times. He had a swollen, bloody nose. Lynette was placed in custody as the suspected aggressor. But here is what Lynette told that officer. She said Brian had struck her in the forehead and choked her. The officer documented it. A prosecutor reviewed the case, determined there was insufficient evidence to determine who started the confrontation. Case dismissed. Brian documented as victim, Lynette documented as suspect, but the choking allegation was noted and then closed. 10 years later, February 2025, another incident, another confrontation in Kentwood. Both made accusations. Again, only Lynette spent a night in custody. 2 incidents, 11 years apart, both dismissed. And now, 1 year after the second incident, Lynette is missing in the Bahamas, and Brian is being questioned about causing harm that resulted in her death. Carly did not learn about the 2015 incident from the news. Her mother had told her, and she confirmed publicly. Her mother had confided that Brian choked her on at least one occasion during their marriage, not just the incident that made it into the report, on at least one occasion. Criminologists are unambiguous on this point. Non-lethal strangulation, choking a partner, is one of the highest statistical predictors of fatal violence in intimate relationships. A person who has been choked by their partner is statistically multiple times more likely to be killed by that partner than someone who has experienced other forms of physical violence. It is not just assault. It is a signal. When someone chokes their partner, they are demonstrating something specific, that they have the physical capacity, the willingness, and the absence of restraint required to end that person's life with their own hands. Researchers who study intimate partner homicide have a specific term for it: non-lethal strangulation, not because it is not serious, but because unlike other forms of physical violence, strangulation that does not kill is statistically likely to precede violence that does. Law enforcement in domestic violence cases is trained to treat strangulation disclosures as an immediate escalation indicator, not just a violent incident, a warning. Lynette disclosed it to a police officer in 2015. She disclosed it again to her daughter privately. And 1 month before she disappeared, she called her mother crying and said she could not take it anymore. The 2015 report documented Lynette's allegation. It was noted, and then the case was closed. What was not closed, what cannot be closed, is what Lynette told her daughter privately, not to a police officer, to her own child. Brian had choked her more than once, and then she told her mother she could not take it anymore. 1 month before she disappeared. That phone call deserves its own moment, but before we get there, the neighbors. Because the picture that emerged from Onstead, Michigan, after Lynette disappeared is not the one the Instagram account showed. A neighbor named Jordan Plentz, 29 years old, who lived across the street from the hookers, described the marriage to the Detroit News as turbulent, a long history of fighting. She said, "I wasn't shocked when I heard about it. They fought for a long time. The violence was pretty bad." A couple who lived across the street, Gary and Deborah Budnick, described their community as tight-knit. Gary Budnick, 75 years old, said he was shocked and saddened, but the neighbor who lived across the street was not shocked. That gap between the life documented on social media and the life visible from across the street is the gap investigators are working to understand. Lynette documented the sunsets, the sea turtles, the cinnamon rolls baking on deck, the adventures, the joy. She did not document the part that her neighbor knew about, that Brian's own stepdaughter knew about, that Lynette herself called her mother crying about 1 month before she disappeared. Approximately 1 month before April 4th, Lynette called her mother Darlene Hamlet crying. She said she could not take it anymore. Darlene confirmed this publicly to ABC News, a woman who had spent 25 years with the same man, who had documented that life in thousands of photos and videos that looked, from the outside, like joy and freedom and adventure, calling her mother crying. 1 month later, she was gone, and the man she called about is sitting in a Bahamian police station. There is one more detail that has not received the analysis it deserves. Carly said alcohol was involved. The couple had been drinking more after being sober for approximately a year and a half. Alcohol was a recurring factor in their arguments. They had recently returned to drinking after a long period of sobriety. 2 people in an 8-foot open dinghy at night, 18 to 22 knot winds, no life jackets, no witnesses to the departure, and drinking had resumed. Carly did not accuse her stepfather of a cold, premeditated act. She described something more specific. She said, "I think emotions were high and drinks were involved. I think he probably just watched her go under and said goodbye. That is not the language of a planned murder. That is the language of a moment that went too far. Watching someone drown and choosing not to help. Rowing away. If that is what happened, it has a legal name, and investigators are determining right now whether the evidence supports it." The name of the boat. Brian and Lynette named their yacht the Soulmate. They documented their life on it for years. And on the night Lynette went into the water, the Soulmate was anchored 1,000 yards away. According to one version of Brian's account, she was swimming toward it. According to another, she was swimming toward shore. According to the map, Brian ended up 4 miles in the wrong direction, and the boat called Soulmate was never reached by the person it was named for. It is still out there somewhere in the waters of the Abaco Islands, the yacht they built their retirement around, the boat they named for each other. Still anchored, still waiting, like everyone else, for an answer that has not come. Carly said it simply. She said, "I don't believe my mom would just fall off the boat." And then she said the question this entire case turns on: why did he row the other way? Here is where the investigation stands tonight, April 13th, 2026. Brian Hooker has been in custody since April 8th. His detention has been extended twice by a Bahamian magistrate. His attorney confirmed he was questioned for more than 3 hours, specifically in relation to causing harm which resulted in her death. Butler herself said that language suggests a possible murder charge. Brian has not been charged. A former FBI agent consulted by Newsweek said that without a body, charges can still be built on digital evidence, messages, GPS data, phone records, the Navionics maps, the recorded phone call, the text messages with 2 different accounts of which direction Lynette was swimming. All of that is in investigators' hands. Under Bahamian law, Brian must be charged or released by tonight. That deadline is tonight. Either Brian Hooker walks out of that police station, or he is formally charged with causing the death of his wife. There is something worth understanding about what that decision means legally. The charge under consideration, causing harm which resulted in death, is not the same as first-degree murder. It covers a range of actions. It covers someone who acted recklessly and caused a death they did not intend. It covers someone who had a duty to act and failed to act. It covers someone who watched a person drown when they had the capacity to help and chose not to. Without a body, without a confirmed cause of death, prosecutors face a higher bar. They must build the case entirely from circumstantial evidence. Messages, GPS data, phone records, the map, the inconsistent accounts, the 8.5-hour delay, and the lanyard on the wrong person. A former FBI agent consulted by Newsweek said these cases can be prosecuted without a body. She cited digital evidence as the most likely foundation. All of that digital evidence is in investigators' hands right now. The question is whether it is enough, and that question is being answered tonight. By the time you finish watching this video, that decision will have been made. There is one more layer that has not been examined the way it deserves. After the search was underway, Brian left Carly a voicemail, not a phone call, not an urgent message asking her to call back immediately because her mother was missing at sea. A voicemail. He said, "Hello, honey, it's Dad. Hey, I just got a call from Hopetown Search and Rescue, and they have found the flotation device that I threw to Mom when she fell overboard. And so there is that. They can now focus all their efforts in a smaller area. They are still out there searching today. So I just wanted to update you and let you know I love you. I'll talk to you later." Read that voicemail carefully. His wife of 25 years is missing at sea, possibly dead. The search has been running for days. His stepdaughter, the woman who has known him since she was 4 years old, is waiting for news, and he left a voicemail. Carly described his tone in that call the same way she described his tone when he told her what happened. Monotone, relaxed. She was in shock, not just by what he said, by how he said it. There are people who manage grief by going flat, who process shock by becoming calm. That is a documented human response to trauma, but it is also the response that investigators notice. Because when a spouse goes missing at sea, and the person who was in the boat with them calls the victim's daughter with a voicemail update about a flotation device, investigators ask questions about that choice, not as proof of anything, as a data point. One of many data points that, assembled together, form the picture that the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the U.S. Coast Guard are working with right now. The lanyard, the flares nobody saw, the 8.5 hours, the 4 miles, the 2 directions Lynette was swimming, the 3 accounts of how she went overboard, the voicemail, the 2015 report, the choking Lynette disclosed to her daughter, on the phone call to her mother 1 month before she disappeared, the neighbor who was not shocked, and a map that Brian drew himself, showing exactly where he went. That does not explain why he did not drop anchor. All of it is documented. All of it has named sources. None of it has been answered. Not yet. And every one of those unanswered questions is sitting in front of investigators right now. Before we get to the final piece, the social media. Lynette Hooker documented her life at sea for years. Thousands of posts, hundreds of videos, a running record of 2 people building a life on the water together. When you go back through that content now, knowing what happened on April 4th, certain things stand out differently. The couple traveled by dinghy regularly, without life jackets. It was not unusual for them. Our Brian and Lynette had crossed between islands, between boats and shores, many times before. The conditions on the night of April 4th were not extraordinary for the Bahamas. 18 to 22 knot winds are common. Experienced sailors know how to navigate them. Lynette's mother told CNN her daughter was experienced on the water, a strong swimmer, comfortable on a dinghy, familiar with the route, a strong swimmer who grew up around lakes and boats, who went overboard. Wearing the engine safety lanyard that belonged on Brian in 22 knot winds at night, without a life jacket, with an 8.5-hour delay before anyone started looking. Every one of those details exists in the public record. Every one of them has a named source. And assembled together, they describe a night that does not fit the picture of a routine boating accident in rough conditions. Before we close, the lanyard. There are only 3 reasons a passenger ends up wearing the operator's safety cord. The operator placed it on the passenger deliberately. The passenger took it from the operator. Or there was a struggle in the boat before someone went into the water. Investigators know which of these possibilities is consistent with the evidence they have. The public does not yet. But the answer to that one question, where was the lanyard and how did it get there, may be the answer to everything that happened in that 8-foot dinghy on the night of April 4th. One final detail. When Brian was escorted back to the Soulmate by police on the night of his arrest, so investigators could search the yacht, he fell overboard. He was handcuffed. He was holding a bundle of clothing. The sea was choppy. He fell in. A life jacket brought him to the surface. Police rescued him. He sustained a knee injury and an abrasion. His attorney described it as an accident in difficult conditions. Investigators noted it. The man who was in the boat the night Lynette went overboard, in conditions he described as rough and dangerous, fell off a police boat in choppy water while handcuffed. He was wearing a life jacket. He was rescued. He survived. Lynette went overboard in conditions Brian described as rough and dangerous. She was not wearing a life jacket. Nobody started looking for 8.5 hours. She has not been found. Lynette Hooker posted her last photo on the day she disappeared. The caption said, "Not going anywhere for a while." She wrote those words in the hours before she got into that dinghy, before the engine cut out, before Brian ended up 4 miles away, before a security guard heard 2 words in the dark at 4 a.m. She's in the water, and now, 9 days later, she still has not been found. Lynette Hooker loved the ocean. She built her life around it, documented every corner of it in photos and videos that showed a woman alive and present and moving through the world with joy. She called the ocean her happy place. And somewhere in those same waters, in the Abaco Islands, in the stretch between Hopetown and Elbow Cay, she is still there, waiting to be found. Waiting for someone to answer the questions her daughter has been asking for 9 days. Why was the lanyard on her? Why did no one see the flares? Why did it take 8.5 hours? Why did the map show 4 miles in the wrong direction? Why did he row the other way? Those questions exist in the public record. Every one of them has a named source. Every one of them is documented, and none of them has been answered. Not yet. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the U.S. Coast Guard. A criminal investigation is active. The ocean does not keep secrets forever. Currents move, tides shift. What sinks eventually surfaces. And in this case, what is already on dry land, in investigators' files, in GPS databases and text message logs, is already building a picture that has led to 5 days in custody and a question that must be answered tonight. Charge him or release him. One of those outcomes happens tonight. Lynette Hooker, 55 years old, missing since April 4th, 2026. From Onstead, Michigan. She deserves answers. Her daughter deserves answers. Her mother deserves answers. And the ocean she loved, the one she called her happy place, deserves to give her back. This video presents analysis based exclusively on publicly documented evidence and statements attributed to named sources. All individuals referenced in connection with this investigation are presumed innocent unless and until formally charged and convicted in a court of law. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime as of the date of this video. His attorney states he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. The purpose of this channel is to examine documented evidence, not to prosecute, advocate, or speculate beyond what confirmed reporting supports. The silenced case, where documented evidence reveals what someone decided you shouldn't know.